Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We're a bunch of policy nerds based in Bangalore, and we like to bring a fresh perspective to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of All Things Policy. I'm your host, Jaison, for today, and I've got with me my colleague from Takshashila, Saurabh Todi. Saurabh, hi.
Hi, Carl.
Hey, Saurabh, thanks for joining me on this podcast conversation. And we thought we'll maybe take on a subject that has created quite the flutter on Twitter and other social media forums, but also not surprisingly, even in homes and office spaces. And that is the restrictions that have been put in place in Cubbon Park recently by the horticulture department. So we'll maybe talk a little bit about why this has come into place. What are some of the remedies that the department can think about in terms of improving these public spaces for the citizenry? And we'll also talk a little bit about what are some of the benefits from parks and recreation centers, right? And so I'm going to tongue-in-cheek call this episode as Parks and Recreations, which some of you know is a famous US TV series. So Saurabh, maybe I'll just set the context before we, get down to having a conversation on this. So Cubbon Park, as you all know, is, a heritage park right at the center of the Bangalore city. So recently the horticulture department, which in a very, I would say, it's a bit strange to know that horticulture department is in charge of maintaining the park. Maybe there are reasons to it. And
why is horticulture, if it's supposed to be a city thing, but it's a horticulture department?
Yeah. You don't get surprised with the main headline, but the question that we had was, wait, horticulture department? Anyway, so they've taken action against, folks who they consider as getting too cozy, to say the least. And also, those who are engaged in, activities like picnics or playing games at the park. Photography, which I saw, was also something that was restricted. But, rather than looking into specifics, which we can maybe deal with in the context of our conversation, if you can maybe start off by giving us a sense of why have these restrictions come in place, right? And what are some of the sort of administrative reasons for this? And then we can
So I mean, from what, the reporting, it seems that there are a few concerns that I think the main kind of force behind this is the Cubbon Park Walkers Association or something. So the idea there is that they were saying that they get distracted and they don't like the fact that there are too many couples who are being too cozy and in the park. And they said, when we go for our walks in the morning or the evening or whenever, you find a couple behind every tree. And then they're we see that the quality of grass is being damaged because people play there. And there's a lot of litter in the park because people eat there and don't, I'm assuming, clean up. So, I mean, again, from what it seems that it is a effort to try to address the problems which definitely exist. But I am not very sure that the tools that they have employed to address these issues are the ones, first of all, which will make any difference in the first place. And second, there are many, many problems here. I mean, we can go one by one, on what they are. But I think just as a basic point, I think the biggest problem here is that how do you enforce it? Do you have a police people there? Do you have the guards? And then are they going to just walk around the park, just looking at behind every tree or looking at each, group of people, whether, are they clicking photographs? Are they, and then there's this idea that.
But Saurabh, they're trying to protect you from snakes and bugs, as they put it. Might be ambitious. I think that's where, if you still give them the benefit of doubt of wanting to, let's say, ensure people's safety, as you said, right, the tools in which they have used to restrict place, just don't seem to make a whole lot of sense.
But I mean, if your concern is snakes and everything, you put up a board saying you be careful about that. I mean, at the end,
which they do have.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, apart from that, I mean, this seems like a very flimsy excuse. I mean, I'm just wondering that even this idea that, you can't be too close to in the park. I mean, what is too close? 1 meter, 2 meter, 5 inches, 10, how do you measure it? I feel like it's just a source of just constant kind of harassment of everybody who's in the park. harassment of young students or couples or even just individuals. I mean, like, do you have to be a couple if you are at a park? You can be friends, you could be siblings, you could be cousins, or it could be like just a friend group. Like, all of this, again, I'm sure that, well, I'm assuming that, it is not supposed to harass people in general, but it will do that because now you have given this unchecked kind of power to, morally police the behavior in the park. And there are many other, like ways. For example, we are living in the age of social media. Cubbon Park is one of those rare green spaces we have in city, where people can sit, relax, and if they cannot click a photograph, if I am going to a park with a few of my friends and I want to, just have a photograph for social media, I mean, am I not allowed to do that? I mean, what kind of a park can you not just have a photograph taken? And then the idea that, oh, you can't play games. I mean, you see like other parks all over the world. I mean, I'm not even talking about in India. I mean, you look at the Central Park in New York, for example. I mean, these concerns, I'm sure every park has. I mean, nobody wants public, like a indecent behavior in public. I mean, that's
Sure.
very understandable. People want
Yeah.
to ensure that you don't, like destroy the grass and all. But there are ways to do it. You can use the nudging like behavior, that you should
Sure.
ensure that, okay, you can like have these campaigns to, be a bit more careful. But there are other, I mean, there's also reasons why these things happen, but we can go on those reasons later. But it is just something that I just don't think it is even remotely possible to implement these rules, except for the fact that you just have increased avenues for harassment. And this will not really end well for anyone, because you're just trying to reduce people coming to the park. And if
Yeah.
the whole point of park is having a public space, making it less accessible to public is not the way to go.
Yeah, and it's quite telling, as I was saying to Saurabh, that the first steps that the authorities take is, to put restrictive measures, right,
Yeah,
or
this bans.
security measures in place. And instead of, as you rightly pointed out, that maybe have a campaign around some behavioral nudges that people can sort of try and imbibe, which will help in maintaining the overall, like the cordial space that Cubbon Park is. But again, it's quite interesting here because, well, some of these parks are actually spaces that people have used, like, for many decades. They bring their family over as a recreation space. In fact, there's even a scheme by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs called the AMRUT, right? The Atal Mission
Mm.
for Rejuvenation and Urban
Yep, yep,
Transformation,
yep.
which
Yeah.
has an objective of developing and renovating parks, right, and open
Mm.
spaces. And again, this comes under the remit of municipal corporations or municipalities, depending on which area that you're in. So it's part of their jurisdiction.
Mm.
So, what do you think could have been done from a policy standpoint? Like, what are the
Mm.
administrative sort of solutions that they could have thought through, given that the AMRUT scheme tries to envisage more open spaces, more greening of parks, as you're also pointing.
So, I mean, I would say, I mean, at least for these three basic, I think, problems which have we've been reading, is that, first of all, I mean, parks again are public spaces, right? I think we have to first also kind of understand why parks exist, or like why do we need them. India, like again, like big cities, we are like heavily populated country with very dense urban environments. So there is a lack of public space first, and there's also lack of space in our homes as well. So you going out and sitting in a kind of a pristine environment, like a park or something, is a way to relax. So that is very important. And then if you are spending time with your family, you would want to be there, have some food and everything. So I was just thinking that if the trash or littering is the problem, you could for example hire more people to clean the grounds, which anyways, I mean, I'm sure you would
Yeah.
have to hire more people to do this, all these moral policing which is going to happen. And you can increase the number of trash cans or other things.
Exactly.
That's one. And then second one is that if your concern is oh my god, people are playing, I mean, what else will you do in a park? If you can't eat in a park, you can't play in the park, you can click a photograph in the park, then what are parks for? I mean, these are not like like sanctuaries that you're just like, we are not in a zoo, that, oh my god, see, there's a plant there. You have to live with it. You have to, like, enjoy it, explore it. So I mean, for example, you can have spaces, for example, okay, this is space is for, like, running around, playing frisbee, playing, badminton, or whatever, or just running. People have their dogs and everything. So there are so many ways. Like, if the concern is that, I mean, it is a park, so people, I mean, they're supposed to play around it. I just don't see what's the problem there. Like, it's not a just garden for show. Like, it's not a garden, it's a park.
Right.
You're supposed to, like, just enjoy and be part of it. And then third one, I think, again, I mean, I can understand this, the risk of indecent behavior is there. I mean, that's why I think in almost all major towns and everywhere, I think parks are closed after 6 p.m. So I can understand that, like, that's a problem. But again, you can't be too close to each other. I don't see how is that going to help. And also, I think, why is that the case? Again, these parks are perhaps the only, like, spaces that I think young couples have also to be with each other, to be away from, like, those like, judgmental eyes of, like, the society. I'm not saying in any way that any indecent behavior is to be condoned. I mean, we all should have a basic moral decency of, how we behave and in public. But to walk around with your partner, to, like, enjoy the scenery and sit together, and I just see it's a very human thing to do, and I don't see why we should stop anyone from doing any of such thing, given that they are within, like, the commonly understood, a commonsensical kind of boundary of, decency, which I think we should have trust in our fellow citizens, that they know what works and what doesn't. And if something is very indecent, you can have an action on it. But don't make these very broad based rules which are bound to be exploited and also violated.
Yeah, absolutely. Saurabh, so why don't we do this? Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, let's round up the discussion and look at what are the ways by which we can find a middle ground to the solution. Because there are quite a number of stakeholders. It'll be interesting to see how we can arrive at some potential solutions to address this problem. So,
Sure.
we'll be right back. Hello, and we're back talking about the Cubbon Park restrictions that had come in place recently. I have my colleague Saurabh here with me. So we fundamentally had an issue with the premise of the Cubbon Park authorities here being the horticulture department. It's still funny when I say that the horticulture department is in charge of Cubbon Park. Leaving that aside, we felt, I think the premise for in place these restrictions was just not justified. But, as people who work in policy, people who work in this space, looking to find solutions where some amount of common ground can be found, we thought it would be helpful to maybe try and explore some potential, remedies and solutions by which we can help improve the current situation, right? And so, Saurabh, I think, as we mentioned at the start, I think their objective of instilling fear has been done, and I think it's been successful. I doubt if anyone in their right mind would now want to go with, be it their friends, family, partners, to engage in any of those activities that
And
they
it's very sad,
construe
right?
as.
I mean,
It is. It absolutely
it's
is.
sad
It
because I think,
absolutely is.
again, I think in terms of solution, I think first of all, again, from the reporting, it seems that, like, a certain, like, walkers association is the one, like, who's been spearheading these kind of changes. I think fundamentally we as citizens should agree that no one subsection of people who use the park should have the priority over the park. Park is for everybody. Every type of activity, which is public activity, every individual has equal right to the park. So, for example, and there are spaces for doing certain things in the park, right? So you have the pathway where people walk, you can jog on it, or whatever. There are, like, big trees, there are shading, and you can sit in the areas where shade is there. In the, like, a lush, like a grass green areas, you can play around. So all of these things, I think we should not fall into this trap that, like, we need to regulate, what can
Sure.
be done or how to use the park, because I think usually at a very broad level people, like, know what to do in a park. So in for the edge cases, right, where you have concerns, so for example, as we discussed before as well, if the cleanliness is an issue, then you ensure that at regular places you have well maintained like dustbins, for recycling, wet waste, whatever. You have those in like placed, which are well maintained. That's very important, so that there is no overflow of trash. And so that should take care of that. You make sure that, you ensure that you make rules that, okay, if you are doing a picnic, for example, you should bring like a mat with you, or like you should have a mat, so that if while eating, while anything, any food thing that is like dropped on the ground is, like not dropped on the soil, so to preserve the quality. You're right. So all of those things, for example, even for the playing, for example, you can have specific areas of the park where, okay, if you want to play around, like this section is where you can play. But to ban things is something
Yeah.
I don't think makes any sense, because it's not helping. Because now, as you said, the fear has been instilled, and
Yeah.
you will now have much less people actually going to Cubbon Park. And if that was the kind of the inspiration, that that we are some exalted section of society who deserve to have the first right of using the park, so we will be the ones to use the park and nobody else can, then it's been achieved. But it would
Right.
be a great shame if we as a society and as fellow citizens of Bengaluru like accept this. We should not.
And look, I think there's also, as you were speaking, I was also trying to split hairs and understand what's a horticulture department's beef with all this, right? So, if it means that they have, certain tree species or plant species that they would like to sort of ensure its maintenance and protection, that's understandable, right? And you want to bring in some kind of penalty or fine for those who are trying to destroy those spaces by trampling on them. It could be anything, right? So
Yeah.
I think you do need a mix of the carrot and stick, because if the issue has been, as you said, that cleanliness has not been maintained, you need to bring in options which come within the spectrum of you can have more trash cans to fining people for littering openly. So while I think it was easy for them to bring in some kind of these restrictions in place, by engaging some kind of awareness campaigns, at the park itself, right?
You can also have, kind of like community engagement, in the sense that you
Sure.
don't have to
Yeah.
ban things. For example, let's say on a weekend, there are so many citizen engagement groups. They can go around, let's say, like even do cleaning drives and all. So a lot of this would have a positive impact on
Positive
public
impact.
behavior. We have also seen that, like for example, how public behavior changes exponentially when you are, let's say, in a metro and like on the road, right? We see that the same citizens, all of us, like would behave like we would not care
We are
as
now
much.
best behavior.
Yeah. So we are on our best behavior, let's say, when we are on metro, but not as much, let's say, when you are, let's say, on a train or on a road or something. So
Sure.
there is a lot of social nudging here. Like you have to ensure like you make a change in behavior, and that will come by making an environment where people feel that they want to make the change. If you restrict them, like so, this is just like using the hammer for everything. Is that just because we are not able to kind of promote a very civil public kind of behavior? There are parks everywhere in the world. There are many countries, developed and developing, where parks are there, people can do whatever. And as you said, there are certain things that you can't do. Obviously you should be careful to not trample on like trees,
Yeah.
or like like destroy that. So there can be like fines and other civil offenses for that. But and even for this.
I think the low hanging fruit here, no pun intended, on trees. But I think, just having signages,
Yeah.
clearly visible signages can, help prevent people from engaging in that sort of behavior, right?
Yeah.
And we have seen that in metros. Like,
Yeah.
you say that you stand behind the yellow line, people adhere to that, right?
Yeah.
People fundamentally adhere to it. So I think that's certainly social nudges that we can introduce.
Plus it's in people's interest as well. I think sometimes we really underestimate like our own fellow citizens. Like I am sure like a vast majority of individuals would want to ensure that their access to Cubbon Park is like it remains open, it remains like a safe space, it remains a healthy space. So people would usually ensure that like they don't do anything. And also I think even with the public indecency kind of issue, there are, like rules regarding this everywhere. I mean, in parks all over the world, I mean, there are things that you can and cannot do, and which there are already laws in place. If somebody is engaging in very like indecent behavior, then like the rule or the fine will apply. But
Yeah,
for
and I think
other things,
yeah,
for
yeah,
other things, like something as common as just holding hands or having
mm,
arms around your partner or your friends or whatever, these things are something
yeah,
that you can't really police.
yeah,
So I think, as you said, like some signages, some kind of like a civic engagement thing, and this trying to build a much more informed civic culture, I think would
absolutely.
go a long way than any of such bans and just this blanket like restrictions.
Yeah. I mean, just finally on this point, right? Because what this reaction by the authorities is going to do is it is going to elicit a counter reaction, which is not maybe going to be pleasant, right?
Yeah, true.
And that's so I mean, you do fight fire with fire. It's a slugfest, and
Yeah.
nobody wants to see that, right? At the end of the
No,
day,
now
you
you'll see, I
want
mean, there are
to.
people now who
Yeah,
go
you'll
in the
find
park and
people,
do
yeah,
stuff.
try
Yeah.
to like, correct, exactly, right? So the extreme sort of reactions to this is maybe just around the corner.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think, yeah, as long as we can respect each other's space,
Hmm.
so sort of getting into this settling scores, I think,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll be in a much better place. But I think I'll maybe we can round up the discussion, sort of,
Hmm.
since also we need to get the podcast out for people to listen. But yeah, I just wanted to leave everyone with the thought of, yeah, how do you engage better in some of these public spaces? Voice your opinion on different social media platforms, for instance. So that's one way to get your voice out. But you're also not essentially disagreeing with the government's position, because the National Urban Greening Policy, right, of 2014, which I've just looked up, has specific guidelines on the development of parks and green spaces. So the policy encourages the creation of spaces for public use and maintaining greenery. A lot of the solutions that we also talked about in this episode. So yeah, let's hope that this doesn't end up in a mess. I mean,
Yeah.
it can get worse than it already is, but yeah.
Yeah, true. I mean, I think, as you said, that as a country, as a dense city, we ought to ensure that we have a lot more green spaces. The access to these green spaces is
It's
not
fundamental.
restricted, and no one section of society has a monopoly or the first right of use. It is for everybody. Everybody has equal stake in it, both to ensure that the areas remains clean and safe, and the fact that they have to be maintained to highest standards, because at the end we are the end users.
Absolutely. And on that very positive note, let's end the conversation. Saurabh, thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll be back with more topics in the future.
Thanks, Carl. Thank you.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.